So I just found out that all giant pandas in zoos around the world are on loan from China. Now, if every panda is property of the government of China, what happens to designer's panda?
Welcome back to Battle of the Sexes.
Welcome to Break Time on Westside, your number one break time podcast show, coming to you from Nairobi, Kenya. The man on the mic is Sir Denver B, and the show is Battle of the Sexes. Now, where do I start from? So I was talking to a friend just towards the end of last week, and the thing is, he kind of brought this whole story up about, slowing it down and making sure you don't bust too quick. Now, granted, as a man who can be considered a connoisseur at this type of scale, I was quite intrigued that he didn't know how, because I thought that I gave the entire lineup on this whole thing. I gave the entire story on how to do it, how not to do it, but it seems like I just didn't, because I've covered everything matters sex on this podcast, especially on this series, because I've spoken about positions, I've spoken about foreplay, I've spoken about prepping for this shit, and I've spoken about the annoyances of this shit. So, granted, I'm actually sort of surprised that I haven't talked about, slowing it down, because I thought at this point the people would have known how to slow it down. But anyways, mad shout out to the homie of mine that did point this out. I don't want to mention his name because it might look like he nuts too quickly. So I figured, why not give you guys a couple of tips that might help you guys in not nutting quickly. Very few tips, I'll probably give you about 5, then maybe add a bonus. So how about I start with the easiest one? So how to postpone your nut. Rule number 1, and this one is probably the one that most guys know. You make sure you come before you go and get some. And I don't know, it's pretty self-explanatory, before you're gonna go and get some. And it's something that the shorties do as well before they go to the club to kind of kill the thirst. But in this case, you're trying to make sure you don't nut as quickly because, shorty got that bomb pussy. By the time you're going in, probably it's been a minute since you gave some. So it'll probably come out in like 3 seconds. Probably that the shorty you're gonna hit cannot let you last in there for more than 11 strokes. We've met these niggas. We see them on Twitter all day every day. So why not go and bust one real quick before you leave the house? Go do that shit real quick. Hell, even though the shorty's coming over, not unless she calls you up in the morning and she's like, I'm almost at your place, then there you're probably, you're probably slightly fucked over. But either way, go, come real quick, go bust a nut, clean yourself off, make sure you clean the tip real good so that, there's no after residue, so that she doesn't suspect that you've been cheating on her and shit, because shorties are suspicious. And then, take a piss, go chill with her, and then let that shit slide. That's one of the easiest ways that I can probably tell you that you can sort of save yourself. Because, obviously, as a guy, one, your sensitivity and your ability to come reduce after the first nut. It's not even facts at this point. It's just science. This is part of nature that we're talking about. I have been told of some people who will pretty much nut, of which I really need to know what it is that you guys take. I need to know what genetics that you guys use, because it is harder for the rest of us. Y'all are few. Y'all are like the people that can't grow fat, because at this rate it's hard for some of us. We know the minute that we get in, 3 seconds later we're done. We can't even do more than 10 seconds. Then afterwards, when we're going in for round 2, it's like 10 hours. We even get tired in this shit. So we might as well know a little bit from y'all. But anyways, that being said, make sure you go beat your meat, get done, then go get some. Next point. While you're doing it, and this is, you've already met shorty, y'all have gone through the foreplay, y'all are getting it in, you slipped it in, and that shit's so good. You already know you're about to bust a nut. This is the minute when you realize that you always replay shit in your head. You can switch to channel 6. You can, switch to a Netflix TV show. You can remember what the fuck Paul Walker did in Fast and the Furious 5. I don't care, really. Just change to anything that isn't sensual. Hell, you can probably start thinking about how to make vanilla pancakes. At that point in time, you've interrupted your thought process, and it's a lot harder for you to nut. It's not even facts, it's science. Hell, you can even think about dumb shit. And this is shit that will constantly help you because, you think about some dumb shit, obviously you won't lose your boner because you're still in there, so you hit it. And, quick tip, if you're doing all of that shit, don't look her in the eyes. Your focus will be, how would I call it? Your focus will kind of be redirected back to where it's supposed to be, and then you'll end up nutting. Also, it's a good way to end up nutting and then wanting a relationship afterwards. This is not a joke. This is actually something that happens to a lot of people. So yeah, make sure you change a bunch of channels in your head. It's some shit that'll actually save you a ton of times. Quick sidebar story. So there was this time when I went for an interview and I didn't know much about the company, hadn't done any research at all. Only thing that I knew was they had started dealing with some shit fairly early. They were pretty new in the game. So I check into the interview room and I find that the 3 people that are interviewing me, 2 of them are people that I knew. And we had known each other for a bit of a while, and we weren't in the best place socially. So obviously, like that point in time, they're on the higher seat in terms of, where people are at the table. And I start being asked questions, and bro, especially since I knew them, from a bit further back, I could barely say shit because when I was being asked a question, there were 6 different lines of thought in my head. So it's like I'm busy choosing from channel 1 to channel 6. And every single one of them is giving me a different response. Needless to say, I didn't get the job, luckily, for one. Fortunately, I didn't get the job. And no word of a lie, that was probably one of the worst interviews I have ever put myself through. I should have probably walked away. But that being said, point is always derail your train of thought. That shit actually does help you a lot. Just make sure you don't derail it when it's already too late. It's almost like when you end up nutting while you're watching porn and they're changing scenes at that time. It's not exactly nice. Now, next point, ask yourself dumb questions. This is shit that actually helps. People actually never know this, especially if you say it out loud. You can even kill the mood. Because when you ask yourself a bunch of dumb questions, it might actually make you laugh. Laughing actually kills boners. This is a fact. Because imagine you're hitting it from the back, you're enjoying the view and shit. Then all of a sudden, you ask yourself this dumb question, if Apple made a car, would it have windows? The minute you ask yourself such a question, it just puts you in this position where you're like, wait, would it really? If you can choose one of my trains of thought, if I masturbate with 2 hands, is that considered a threesome? Debate that shit with yourself in your head. This is shit that actually helps you in such a sense that you actually cannot really find a good answer for them, or you'll end up laughing. And the thing is, if you start laughing, she's going to ask you what's so funny. So you're obviously going to try and retain that laughter. When you're trying to retain that laughter, obviously it's taking you away from your train of thought of trying to make sure you don't nut, which can help you nut if you actually think about it, and enjoying the pussy. So it's a very good way to kill the vibe very, very quickly. Trust me, this is one of those facts that you will use for a lot of things. Also, if someone's pissing you off, you can start asking yourself such dumb questions, and it'll help you kill a very bad situation or a very awkward situation very quickly. Now, next point. This one is probably something that I'd probably advise you to do. Now, when you're doing it with your shorty or with your nigga, I don't care. You change positions, and trust me, that shit actually works. changing positions actually does work. Not for everyone, but for those who can manage to hold it up long enough, changing positions actually helps. So, quick thing. Now, whenever you change positions, it can sort of alter your train of thought. So, once your train of thought is altered, it kind of kills the whole vibe, and it puts you in a position where you can actually, how would I say, you can almost lose your boner, but not really. It de-escalates the situation, but well enough that you don't actually lose the boner. So with that being said, now obviously for some of you shorties, you'll think that we change positions because we don't want to nut, and you're probably right. Most of us probably don't want to nut at that time. But that being said, there are times when we want certain positions to nut too. I have friends that love doggy. I have friends that like froggy. Although I don't get why they do that, because it's almost like they're just trying to plant kids in there. There are others that like missionary. But either way, for some people, they're trying to do that so that they can nut, and for others, it's so that they don't nut. Both actually work really, really well. Now, fun fact, so there's this bit where you can let your girl get on top, and then, she rides you. And of course, for most girls, they start riding 1, 2, 3, the fourth stroke, they'll start talking like their kneecaps is overheated and shit. So there's this thing where they like grind the pelvis. It's like they move the pelvis back and forth, so it's almost like they're grinding on top of you. And I kid you not, like, shorties actually think that shit actually feels good for us. And for fuck's sake, like, that shit means it feels like nothing. We honestly don't get shit. It's also another way that people actually end up de-escalating the situation, because at that point in time, if you're about to nut and then she stops and she starts doing that, it's not gonna do anything. Don't test it out, and then you end up dropping your kids in her. But trust me, like, this is shit that does nothing for us. For the ladies listening, I'm sorry, but I had to say it like it is. It does nothing for us. You might think that it gives us pleasure, but it doesn't. I think the most that it does is just put you in a nice whining position, and that's probably the most entertaining that it can be. Then anyways, on to the next point. This is I honestly feel like I've done something bad there. But anyways, next point. You can, and yes, the final point. So whenever you're doing it, if you want a nice way to de-escalate but keep the situation at the same level, stop and start making out. Trust me, this is some shit that works. Trust me, it's a proper gem of a tip. So while you're doing it, a lot of times, if you stop and you start making out, it kind of deviates from, the train of sensitivity. Because, maximum sensitivity on your dick is what will kind of make you get to the point where you come. Now, if you move that train of sensitivity onto, like your lips through a makeout and shit, or at least you divide it in a sense, and it's not something that you consciously do. It's pretty much just automatic. The minute you start making out, it just moves it. Now, if you stop and you do that, it actually does kind of de-escalate it, but it keeps it at the right level, because it's like it hasn't killed the boner, it hasn't interrupted your train of thought, it hasn't done anything but just bring you back to a good level. And for some reason, I don't know why, like, people actually never really think that this works, but it actually does. Hell, even shorties know that this works, because a lot of times it's like the guy is going so fast, then it almost looks like this guy's about to finish, then he stops and he starts making out, and you're like, wait, I thought that, and you are going to, okay. So yeah, it is something that we do a lot as guys, and it is something that has worked to our advantage for a very, very long time. If you're not the type that makes out, then I'm sorry, there's probably something else you can do. I don't know, like when you're hitting it, like pinch both of our nipples at the same time as you're hitting it. It might probably take a screenshot on some shit. Now, that being said, I believe that those should be enough tips. Those should be enough tricks that you can try out as a guy to make sure you don't nut, because a lot of times we go in and they're so good that it comes out too quick. So for that, I feel as though 5 tricks are more than enough. And if you haven't tried any of these might help. If you have, I'm sure your results can speak for a lot of us, or they can't, because for some they nut too quickly, and for others it holds them back well enough. If you have any other tips, as usual, slide them down to the DMs at Breaktime on Westside on IG. And yes, now that I even remember it, there's a bonus tip that's there. No pun intended. So while you're doing it, like pull your dick out and then like smack the pussy with it. It sort of like resets to factory settings, or so I've been told. I'm not entirely sure, but for some reason it works. It's a nice way to tease her, but at the same time it kind of gives you a break. So it works out of the same way, asking yourself dumb questions or changing positions, especially changing positions and making out. It sort of works the same way, but it just gets your dick out of the equation in a really nice and fun manner. Anyways, that's been it for me on Battle of the Sexes. Like I said, if you guys have any more tips, as usual, you can hit me up on DMs on the IG. Make sure you use those tips so that the next time she's being asked if her nigga came quickly, she'll be like, nothing like that.